Thank you. Good afternoon. It's March 19th, just after 1:30. This is Education and Culture Committee. This is our third and final work session as a committee on the FY27 32 Capital Improvements Program for MCPS. I want to thank my colleagues, Councilmember Evans and Councilmember Mink, for their work and for staff's work on this. I do want to just say at the top, this is a difficult moment for MCPS's capital budget here, and in the sense that, you know, we've confronted, I think for the first time in a long time, with the fact that 2/3 of our facilities are in need of significant repair. They're older than 25 years old. 2/3 are older than 25 years. 75% need significant repairs, and there's also, on top of that, there's $1 billion gap between what the board says our school actually needs and what our affordability guidelines would allow us to spend currently. As I said at our last session, you know, the kicking the can metaphor is upon us again. We can't continue to do that. And so even though we're going to discuss the non-recommended reductions today and likely move many of them forward to full council and as part of the overall consideration, every maintenance gap creates more cost and more problems down the road. And I'm mindful. I'm in my schools a lot. I know my colleagues are too, of just that the need is really real. And so we've heard over the last two sessions from the superintendent. We've looked at enrollment projections. We've talked about the boundary studies, and we went high level on the non-recommended reduction scenarios. I appreciate you all providing those. We'll go project by project today with Mr. Prouty and Mr. Levchenko, and colleagues can ask questions. I think the public, it's important that we go through this and allow people to talk about the changes and what's happening, so people know not only what the need is, but what is being proposed and what we're going to have to recommend based on affordability. So with that, unless my colleagues have anything they'd like to say, I'll turn it over to, I think, Mr. Levchenko first. Mr. Levchenko.
Sure. Thanks for that introduction. And just a little bit on the schedule. We are looking at taking this to the full council. Probably we're looking at April 14th right now. I don't think it's a set date, but and as you know, we've got the operating budget hearings the week before, so there is a lot of scheduling going on for that. That would also be the date where we would also provide an update to the council on the CIP as a whole. So to get a sense of where we are in terms of the gap that we've talked a lot about, and the GO committee has also talked a lot about. But this will be a chance for the full council to hear that on the 14th. And that gives us about a month from then to work towards reconciling the CIP in mid-May. And as we talked about, the scenarios that MCPS was asked to come up with were intended to address the undesignated reductions that the executive had made for the MCPS CIP. And they certainly, as we talked about at the last meeting, they did that. Staff felt that they were responsive to the requests that you had asked them. What we still have before us, though, is the gap related to spending affordability going forward, because the executive assumed a significantly higher amount of bonds planned for issue than the council's spending affordability would allow. So we're going to have that reconciliation issue going forward, and the council will hear more about that when we do the update in mid-April.
And maybe, Keith, if you could just lay that, I know you lay it out in the packet, but just to say it on the record, so that it's important, I think, for people to conceptually understand the difference. So there's obviously the school system made a request, the board made a request, the county executive made a recommendation, which was less than the board's request for MCPS, but was based on a higher level of spending affordability. And so could you talk about that gap versus what the larger gap is, which obviously needs to be made up with the whole CIP?
Sure. Yeah, the board's request was a significant increase from the amended CIP. The executive also recommended an increase to the amended CIP, but at a lower level than what MCPS had requested. And that difference is what is reflected in the undesignated reductions we're talking about. It was about $160 million for the schools that they had to come up with, both current revenue and bonds, that the executive had not made specific cuts to. Now, the executive did make some specific cuts in the CIP, including, for instance, most notably, the CESC headquarters future project. That's a big pot of placeholder dollars that the executive recommended further discussion about a potential P3 project, and the school system agreed they would look at that, and the school system made a significant change in that project as part of its non-recommended reductions. So that was an explicit cut in the executive's recommendation. But he had the undesignated cuts as well, and that's really what we needed information from MCPS on to understand. Did the schools, first, did they accept the explicit cuts? In some cases they did, in some cases they didn't. But then they had to make other cuts to get to the number that you had asked them for, to try to get closer to the January 15th baseline. So that's just sort of one set of numbers. But with the spending affordability, the executive was about $390 million higher in bonds in the 6-year period than the approved council spending affordability guidelines. That plus an ancillary impact on current revenue, or PAYGO in the CIP, since that is usually linked to the bonds. It's 10% of bonds is the fiscal policy level. So that was another $39 million potentially of a gap there. And then some other implications with inflation and implementation rate. Those are more technical adjustments, but those are also affected by what you do with the bonds planned for issue. So all of that led to about a $437 million gap that is not addressed, certainly not addressed by schools. We wouldn't expect them to fully address that as part of this. But in the broader CIP, we will still have to address that across the board and find either additional revenue or additional cuts across the entire CIP, not just the schools, but
Right.
Parks, college, general government, county government, all of that. So that $437 million is still hanging over us.
So, yeah, and I just want to make clear that while all of that $437 million should not and will not come from the schools, some of it will, theoretically, if no further action is taken on the spending affordability guidelines, because the schools are such a big part of the CIP. So that would necessitate further reduction, even outside of the reductions that we're looking at today. So I just want to, I don't want that to happen. As we know, I made a motion for us to concur with the executive's spending affordability guidelines, in large part because of that reason. But I just want to be clear to, I know the school system's aware, but to the public for whom all this can be very arcane, this is because there's a lot of advocacy, rightly so, we're going to go through these projects about please don't delay us, please don't take us out, please put us back in. And I just want people to understand the gravity of where we're at in vis-a-vis the need and what is currently available.
Right.
Obviously, we're not done with the process. So thank you for laying that out. I think it's important for people to understand.
Sure.
So do you want to dive into the projects now?
Yeah, and
Okay.
we're going to sort of walk through the packet.
Great.
And we do have the packet available to project if there's a particular chart that the council members would like to see projected on the screen. We can do that. But I think we could probably walk through it through discussion.
I think so.
We'll
And
give
if
that a
colleagues
go.
have questions, just pause and we'll ask questions.
All right, so we're just going to sort of walk through them, essentially doing the individual school projects first, and then we'll move into the major capital projects and then the county-wide projects. The first one listed in the packet on page 2 is the Bethesda Chevy Chase Walter Johnson Elementary School placeholder project. This was not included in the board's request. It had been a placeholder project for several years, anticipating the potential for some additional capacity needed between those two clusters. With the enrollment projections dipping a bit, MCPS feels that this project can be put off. We do have a potential area-wide elementary school boundary study that's currently in the works. So that could certainly influence this project as well. I did look at the numbers on the enrollment and capacity. For most of the 6-year period, including at the end, the two clusters combined would be at about 85% utilization. And that is a bit down from what it looked like a couple years ago because of the enrollment projections you've heard about those dips. So it's not an obvious need at this point, and it was placeholder money in the out years anyway. So staff is comfortable with the board's choice to remove this project at this time.
Any questions? Councilmember Make.
I just wanted to better understand how the enrollment projections are done and how, to what degree is it based on kind of local patterns and there's programs that are different schools and all those types of things versus, there's larger scale numbers that we can look at countywide, statewide. To what degree are the numbers that MCPS is looking at specific to the specific schools and the programming that's available and the patterns that they might be seeing in that region?
All right, good afternoon, DJ Conley, Capital Budget Manager. So we've talked about this quite a bit in our last few board work sessions, but our base layer is our cohort survival. If you're a kindergartner at a certain school, you're typically going to matriculate year by year through that school. We have 3-year, 5-year, and 10-year trends, grade by grade. We take pipeline development into consideration. We use the county planning student generation rates, which I know there's been a lot of discussion about that. I think sort of a misconception about the student generation rates are that they're assumptions. They're actual real numbers that are used that are actually producing public school students in particular types of housing units, in particular clusters. So those are real actual numbers that we get from planning. We meet monthly with our program folks on the curriculum side to go over any anticipated programming, whether it's pre-K, special ed, any sort of CTE programs at the high school level, things like that. So these are all sort of baked into the 1-year and 6-year projections. So it's a continuous cycle. It doesn't just stop on September 30th. We continuously refine the enrollment projections throughout the year, taking a look at mobility rates and things that you've mentioned. And it's definitely different by cluster, even by elementary school, as you know, with certain schools. So these historical trend data are definitely looked at constantly.
Thank you. That's helpful. And do we have something on that shows how our projections have compared to the realities over time?
Yes, we have shown that at a few different board meetings. They're all kind of blending together, but I believe it was the last one, last Thursday, and even the second work session in the spring CIP. We have, in the past 5 or 6 years, we've been over projecting. So the numbers have been coming lower than we projected. So I know people are getting sort of used to now seeing a dip in enrollment, but we have been over projecting, thinking that we would rebound after COVID. And we are not the only LEA, to be clear, to do that. So.
Right.
And if I may, I just wanted to add to what Mr. Connolly already said, and this is what we have been talking about in our presentations, is one of the other things that is impacting our enrollment is the overall birth rate. That has been, steady. There's been a steady decline on that, and I think that trend started nationally somewhere around 2008, but we're seeing the effects here locally. That is, again, obviously we have to get those students into the kindergarten, and then obviously the cohort survival will track them through the grades. But if the students are coming in, the overall enrollment is going to go down.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for those watching at home, LEA is Local Education Agency. No, that's all right. So I think without objection, I think the way we'll do them, Keith, is just go one by one, right? So without objection, we'll concur with the board's removal of the Bethesda Chevy Chase Walter Johnson Elementary project.
Right, and where we do have projects impacted by the non-recommended reductions, we'll make that clear. What the agency request is, what their non-recommended reduction was, what the executive recommendation was, et cetera. So we'll see all that.
Great.
The next project is the Burtonsville Elementary School Replacement Project. This is a project already under construction, scheduled for an opening date of August of this year. So as you could expect, not much changing in this project at this point. The proposal is identical to the amended CIP in terms of the total project cost. I did note in the packet the enrollment projections, which once again are showing there could be some extra space available perhaps. Once again, the elementary school boundary change we talked about can take a look at that. But given this project's already nearly complete, this is not something we would bring up to reconsider at this point.
Absolutely. I know the district council members excited. We're all excited about this, and I was at the groundbreaking. I think many of us were. So concur to approve as requested by the board.
The next one is in a similar situation, the Crown High School new project or new school project. It has an opening date of August 2027, so a year from this August, and is fully appropriated at this point. So the school system is recommending that this project continue as it is, as approved. Once again, the enrollment projections are down a good bit. I looked across all of the clusters that would be potentially impacted or were initially looked at for this school, and they're all quite a bit lower. So we basically are building new school capacity that would be available. And as we've talked about, the boundary study discussion led to a superintendent recommendation to relocate the current Wooten High School to the Crown High School and transition the current Wooten High School facility to a holding facility. That's a decision the board is expected to conclude at its March 26th meeting coming up. But from a capital standpoint, we have the high school project finishing up. Regardless of the boundary decisions and everything else, we have this project working its way through the CIP. We don't see any change to that project happening, regardless of the programming issue, which is still very much out there.
I appreciate you clarifying that. The building needs to be built, and someone will be in it, and the board will decide that next week. So without objection.
The next project is the Joanne Lelich at Broad Acres Elementary School Replacement Project. It's also under construction. It's recommended, or the opening date is August 2026, so if you recall, it's sort of on the Burtonsville schedule. It's opening up very soon. Once again, in this case, there's not necessarily a lot of extra space available in the schools surrounding this, so I don't know how much impact there would be from the elementary school boundary study. But once again, given that it's under construction, staff doesn't have any issues with this project as included in the requested CIP.
Any questions on that one? Seeing none, without objection, Broad Acres approved as requested by the board.
The next one is the Northwood High School Addition Facility Upgrade Project. This has an opening date of August 2027. The Northwood students are currently in the Woodward facility, which is another project we'll talk about. But given, once again, the project is approaching completion and the board is recommending the same dollars as approved for this project. Of course, we have the boundary study underway that will determine which students will go to the new Woodward facility and which schools they will relieve. I did include in the page 6 of the packet of the memo the projections for the other high schools that could be affected, including obviously Northwood, but also Woodward, Blair, Einstein, Kennedy, Wheaton, Walter Johnson. Overall, there is space available, but there's also a number of schools that have some deficits. So there is some work to do in that boundary study to try to balance those numbers out. But it's not as significant as a capacity issue as it was a couple of years ago, as we're seeing with other schools. So staff is once again comfortable with this project as it's under construction and moving forward as planned.
Without objection, approve as requested and planned. Thank you for Northwood.
The next one is the Sligo Creek Elementary School Replacement Project. This is a new project that was requested by the board this year. It would relocate the Sligo Creek Elementary School to a to-be-determined site. The total project cost was about $70.5 million, and that is based on MCPS's square foot construction costs and planning and design assumptions for its projects. And that could be a whole separate discussion about the trends we're seeing in school construction costs. But here's where you're seeing the immediate impact of that. Basically a new school project, elementary school, is about $70 million. So just for walking around information, that's what we're talking about. This project, as well as the Silver Spring International Middle School project, were linked to the superintendent's recommendation to relocate both schools off that site and to convert that site into a potential holding facility. However, those items were discussed in more detail by the board and deferred pending further discussion of the elementary school boundary study we've been talking about. And then consequent to that, the county executive's recommended CIP assumes to keep both the Sligo Creek Elementary School on its site and the Silver Spring International Middle School on that site as well. So the executive removed the elements of those projects out of his recommended CIP. With the non-recommended reductions that MCPS provided, they also, in scenario A, which is the primary one we'll be talking about today, they also recommend keeping both schools on site for now. So it's still an issue to be determined later, but as of this current budget process, if we assume scenario A, then those schools, the capital work associated with moving the students off those sites would be removed from the requested CIP.
Yep, and just to be clear, I think, many of us chimed in about this. There's a lot of advocacy from the community, and in both scenario A, as you said, and the county executive keep both schools on site, and so the replacement is not funded, and that's a recommended reduction.
Right.
Just restating what you just said. And any comments on that? Obviously, we're going to have there's more work to be done on both of these, but at this point, I think that's the right approach and agree with that. And so we would concur without objection on this reduction.
And just to note, a linked issue is the Eastern Middle School Major Capital Project. That would have had an addition to help accommodate some of the middle school students. Those dollars for the addition were also removed by the executive and are also not assumed in scenario A. And that's really part of the next set of projects we're talking about, but intricately linked to the Sligo Creek project, given the location on the old Blair High School site. The next project is the Woodward High School reopening project. Once again, it's moving along. Even with the Northwood students on site, there were still additional phases of work occurring on that property. It does have a completion date for all this work by August of 2027, and the project is fully appropriated. There are still some state aid issues associated with this project that we're hoping to work out. As those play out, we will make those changes, hopefully to increase perhaps some state aid for this that we lost a couple of years ago, but more to come on that. But the project itself, staff recommends approval as requested by the board.
Without objection, approving on the Woodward reopening, keeping that project unchanged and opening August 2027, as you said.
The next set of projects are the major capital projects. There are two projects in the CIP. One is and they're both umbrella projects with lots of sub-projects. One is the elementary school version of that, and the other is the secondary version for the middle and high schools. And on page 7 of the packet, I've shown charts for both of those umbrella projects, showing the amended CIP funding, the proposed funding by the board, and then how the non-recommended reductions would impact the projects. But getting into the specifics, page 8 of the packet, looking at elementary schools first, you can see all the schools that are either in the amended version of this project or in the board's request. What I want to point out in particular is that 3 projects, the Twin Brook Elementary School, the Whetstone Elementary School, and the Damascus Elementary School, were in the approved CIP but are recommended to be removed. And this gets to the prioritization of projects. And we talked about this a good bit in the first 2 sessions, about how MCPS went through a new facility assessment process and identified the most critical projects to move forward with. And it's been realigning various projects in the CIP accordingly. And the major capital projects are one of them. So you see those 3 projects are removed, but you have 2 new projects placed in there, Burning Tree Elementary School and Highland View Elementary School. So those both are in, and not surprisingly, you're seeing big numbers, about $70 million for those projects. If you recall, the replacement project cost for Sligo was about $70 million. So we're seeing, these are very comprehensive major capital projects for these schools. We're also seeing the continuation or the continued funding for the Piney Branch Elementary School and the Cold Spring Elementary School. So those projects at the updated funding levels, remember I mentioned the construction cost increases, and the switch of projects is what we're seeing in the board's original request for the major capital projects. Then we have the non-recommended reductions that were asked for. And the impact of those non-recommended reductions is shown at the bottom of page 8 for the elementary schools. So, of course, the 3 elementary schools I mentioned that were removed, they're still removed. But now you also see some delays in the projects. You see Cold Spring Elementary School and Highland View, they're both pushed back 3 years from the board's proposed CIP. And then the Piney Branch Elementary School and Burning Tree Elementary School are pushed back 1 year each. So those projects are intended to push the dollars out a bit. Some of the dollars go beyond 6 years, so that helps in terms of the overall 6-year reduction that they're trying to get closer to the executive's request. But that is one strategy they used in scenario A, was to have those project deferrals.
I appreciate that. I think I know we just did the Sims question, so I want to ask something related to that, and I also want to my MCPS colleague, if you want to chime in on anything, or just let us know if you want to provide any background, and then I'll come back to this, Keith. Right. So the superintendent is recommending that Sims have a 55% utilization rate under modified option B for the Woodward boundary study. If it's safety related, then the official capacity for the school should be reduced, right, to reflect the number of students who can attend the school safely? Could you explain that? The thinking there?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Sure. So the utilization for Sims was recommended under modified option B is 55%. Is it, assuming it's safety related? Is it? I'm asking.
No, it's related to the overall fact that, as we were working with our consultant with these boundaries, one thing became clear, which is something that we have been talking about. Middle school capacities throughout the district has been, like, we have a lot of capacity at middle school level. So these adjustments is just gonna, show that as the boundaries were adjusted, some of the middle schools. So Sims is not the lowest utilization. I'm not sure if we can pull it up, but there are other middle schools as part of this boundary study process has had seen their utilization go down just because we have a lot of capacity at the middle school level.
Can I have that?
Sure.
So there's an overall student count, a lack thereof, at the middle school level, and there's geographic proximity from school to school. So some of our middle schools are right across the street. You know, you have a Forest Oak and a Gaithersburg that are right across the street. So a lot of these schools have similar walkers. They could have walkers that overlap. But there were two other middle schools that actually had lower utilization than Sims. So I believe it was Ridgeview and Lakelands Park that were actually lower than Sims in the boundary study, in the recommended option.
In the recommended option, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Do you have a question? Go ahead, Councilor May.
Lower than 55%, sorry, just to, really?
Correct. I mean, we are seeing very, very low utilization at the middle school level, countywide.
So with the removal of, there's, some elementary schools are removed, right, from Sims under that option, which is how it's, and that brings the, am I correct that there's some elementary schools that are removed from the Sims?
Yes, I mean, obviously, those are, you know, the maps, the options are produced based on the factors. So again, you know, as Mr. Connolly was explaining, you know, based on geographic proximity and number of walkers, the maps were adjusted. Obviously, that removed some of the elementary schools from Sims as we were trying to balance the policy factors that the board has. And again, you know, yeah, Sims is not the only school with low utilization. It just so happens we do have the most amount of capacity in our middle schools.
I mean, if we have multiple, that's even more interesting. I mean, if we have multiple middle schools that are 55% or below, that's just an interest. I mean, that is obviously way below what we're aiming for. So, to return to this later, but noting that that's quite a number. Yeah.
Thank you for clearing that up. So back to what where on the major capital projects, I think you were done presenting
With
on
the elementary piece.
the elementary side of it,
Right.
right? Yes, the elementary ones. So just on that, you explained, you know, what's happening. Obviously, some tough decisions here. There's a lot of need. I do want you. You know, I was recently at Cold Spring Elementary and saw the needs there. Could you just talk about, again, I know these are non-recommended, but what it would mean in the rationale behind the 3-year extension for both them and Highland View, as a, you know, just what went into that thought process there?
Sure. So we outlined our CIP, our new CIP framework that we came up with priority order. We had to make some difficult decisions, non-recommended reductions. So we actually went down priority by priority. So our top 2 elementaries in our new CIP framework were Piney Branch and Burning Tree. So those were number 1 and number 2 at the elementary school level. So Cold Spring and Highland View were number 3 and number 4. We understand Cold Spring is the only open floor plan school that we have left in MCPS. We understand. But we were going down by priority order.
And what role did the fact that you just brought up, what role, if any, did that play in because it's a unique thing, right? So it's not like you have a weight for that, because there's no, or maybe you do.
It's not specific to open floor, but we
Safety
have an educational adequacy piece where it takes indoor air quality, windowless classrooms, size of classrooms. So there's a bunch of different factors that go into that educational adequacy that they scored favorably or unfavorably, however you want to say it. But that was taken into account, not open versus non-open.
Sure, yeah. Is safety, because that's one of the main concerns from the folks there. Was that factored in any way? Like
there was no specific line item for safety. But
all right, so that was not factored in. And I get it, because there's no specific line item for it. We might be something. I think this is a unique situation, this school in particular. Mr. Levchenko, so the way you put Cold Spring in, you moved it, you starting it in 31. Is that correct?
Under the non-recommended reduction, Cold Spring and Highland View are both pushed back 3 years. So the expenditure schedules basically remain as they are, just start 3 years later.
Right. And I'm looking here, I think I see no expenditures in 27, 28, 29, 30.
Right.
They start in 31.
yeah, it would be an estimated completion date of August of 34.
34.
Mm-hmm.
And that project is 59. million. So if you if you slid everything down, like say if you did it 2 years, that would what would that do to 32?
If we just delayed it by 2 years
Yeah.
versus 3, you'd have 1 year of construction. So you're probably talking about you're adding 30 million to the 6 year.
That would
The first year of construction is typically where you see your majority of dollars for an elementary school.
Got it. So that would move like 30 million into the FY32.
Yeah, in order to align to the CE's recommendation, we had to remove considerable construction dollars into the out years, and these were 2 of the projects.
Got it.
Yeah, the beyond 6 years here basically has 2 years in it. So
That's the
part of
49.
that,
So it's like
as he's
half.
saying, part of it would come back, part of it would stay beyond 6 years.
Got it. Yeah, that's it's tough to swallow. So we're going to talk later about obviously all of this we have to consider in the larger CIP. So I don't know. I think this one is a unique one. They're all important, but there's some special factors here. So if we, Keith, if we were to adjust this school, for example, we'd have to either find it later on in what we're going through here, and there are some opportunities potentially to find some savings, or it'd have to be just figured out at the end.
Right. Well, at a minimum, at the end of this process, we'll be prioritizing and having to reconcile every year of the CIP
Right.
by revenue source. But it is helpful to hear from the committee what their priorities are. We want the reconciliation to reflect the committee and
Right.
ultimately the council's priorities. So if Cold Spring is something that you would like to see if it can be accommodated in the CIP, my suggestion would be that we reflect it the way you would like it now. And then we may have to come back and defer it again.
Right.
But probably better to separate it today from the
Yeah.
other scenario A reductions so that we can respect the committee's wishes to see if we can fit it.
Well, I see what my colleagues have to say. I'd like to move it to just a 1 year, a 2 year reduction or delay.
2 year?
But I want to hear what
And if I
colleagues
can
have to say.
chime in really quick, it's 28.7 if we went with the assumed expenditure schedule.
Okay.
So if you wouldn't bring it back unless you want a technical adjustment, you would be assuming 28.7 million more in the
Right.
6 year.
So you saved me $2 million already.
Yeah, that's what we aim to do.
But you okay with that? Or you want to you don't have to say anything. You just say I'm okay.
I bet I could.
Okay. Okay, go ahead. Councilor Mick.
I'm okay with that, but that's not the only. That's also not the only priority because it's it's health and safety, and I would put this in that. I would put this in that category. It's a different type of health and safety issue, but it is. But I would also put it in that category. But we have HVACs that are not being addressed in this budget. Also, we have kids going to school who can't. And staff who cannot breathe healthy air and are getting physical, results as a result of it. Which is also an urgent health and safety issue. And what I know is in all of our minds as we sit here is that this is the beginning of the cuts. This is at the county executive's level. We are going to have to go deeper than this, and it's already so unacceptable to not be able to put these basic health and safety projects, to treat them with the urgency that they need and deserve. Like what we're discussing here right now is not acceptable. And it's going to be worse when we bring it to the full council if we are indeed going to move forward without even moving to the county executive's recommended level. So I remain very concerned about that. Not only is it unacceptable from a moral and ethical perspective, it's a liability. I mean, it should be. So I think that we really need to return to the conversation with seriousness about the GO bond limits and what we're really going to do here, and have that tied directly to the health and safety implications of the staff and students who are in these buildings. So I'm fine with moving that up, but I also think that there's not going to be, like, let's just be real. There's not going to be room. There's certainly not going to be room for conversation if we're not even going to move up the bond limits. And there's other projects that are as important that are also not being addressed as well.
Very important, and I agree. Councilmember Evans.
Yes, this is tough, right? There is so much work that needs to happen and so much that may not happen. I think my thinking right now is moving one up makes it feel like others are not important. I think I'm more apt to want to look at everything as a whole, but yeah, because I almost think about Burning Tree. I almost want you to kind of go into that. I think I have an idea of some of the needs at all the other schools, but we're here to make tough decisions. So,
Well, what I will say to Mr. Levchenko's point, in having this be your first CIP on this side,
it is.
you know, we can control what we can control, and this is kind of a way of us saying, and we can do this with other things too. It's not just this project. And if you want to bring things up, if more money were to become available in this puzzle, either through additional revenue or additional bond capacity, or other projects that are removed in other parts of the CIP, you know, because in this specific case, we're saying in FY32 we need to find $28 million. There's a lot of factors that go into that. And we're saying, if possible, we'd like to see that happen. As Mr. Levchenko said, we might have to come back and say that it's not able to happen. But we, you know, and that could be done with other projects too. So I get your point. It's kind of I think the chances of it happening at all, if we don't say anything, are very, 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 very low. This gives it a chance. And other things can be given a chance too. I'm just saying this is the first one that I've come to where I've said, I think I want to, for the unique
just
situation.
to sort of note
like a
how this
signal.
differs from, say, the operating budget.
Right.
With the operating budget, you have a reconciliation list, and so items can go on the reconciliation list and be considered later and can come off the list and be funded. We don't have a reconciliation list in the CIP.
Right.
So if something is cut early and the financial situation doesn't markedly improve, it's probably not coming back. So in order to capture what this committee and the other committees are trying to do, we do want committees to say if they want something to be funded as a priority. That helps. It doesn't mean it's going to ultimately get funded,
Yeah.
but has a better chance if it's identified earlier than coming back later.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. It all does. I understand it.
Yeah, I know you do.
Me, yeah, in flux does not mean I don't understand it, but I'm supportive of it.
Okay. So 3-0, 2-year delay for Cold Spring instead of 3 years.
Right.
With the construction starting in 32.
Right, we've got that. We'll make a note of that. That's the way it will appear in our tracking system going forward. It will add to the gap in that year, and we'll go from there.
We'll figure it out. Thank you. Okay, so let's continue. And then on the other projects, is there anything else colleagues want to talk about on the elementary major capital projects? Burning Tree and Highland are here. Highland was also delayed. Burning, and then and we just addressed Cold Spring, but I think any other questions on those? No. Okay. So I think we'll accept the remaining changes
Okay.
consistent with scenario A.
All right, the next set of projects is the major capital projects secondary. And page 9 of the memo shows the board's proposal. And you had, in the amended CIP, you had Eastern Middle School, Damascus, Wooten, Magruder, and Sligo Middle School. The Wooten and Magruder High School projects had 6-year funding in the amended CIP, or beyond 6-year funding, I'm sorry. Those projects had those dollars removed. So similar to what I mentioned before, they reprioritized within the secondary major capital project. You do see Eastern and Damascus middle schools They are on their, they've got the board requested schedule here to be completed. They also have updated numbers for them as well. Once again, the construction costs are catching up to us in these projects. So you can see those. And then you have the Sligo Middle School project with a completion date of August 2031. That is new to the CIP. It would also include additional capacity to address seats needed due to the proposed Sims closure, which we talked about earlier. So with the, and that's important when we get to the non-recommended reductions piece of this, which is further down the page on page 9. So the Sligo Middle School, because it's caught up in the International Middle School issue and Sligo Creek, that project is removed because we're not assuming at this time what is going to be happening to those students moving off their current campuses. So that project is removed. The Wooten and Magruder schools are unchanged. Eastern and Damascus, as noted in the non-recommended package that came over from the superintendent, those are very high priorities of the school system to try to maintain. So those are reflected in here. There are some technical adjustments, but nothing changing the requested schedules for those projects. And so those are kept on their schedules even as part of scenario A.
Yeah, and I just want to lift up, I mean, Eastern, I grew up right in, I've been in Eastern so many times, it's been needing rehabilitation for such a long time. Damascus obviously has serious issues. I was there recently too. I'm glad, I appreciate the school system and the school board keeping them on track. Obviously, the Sligo makes sense in the context of the previous actions around Sims. And obviously, Wooten and Magruder remain unchanged in this scenario. Any comments on these? Okay, so without objection, we will concur with the non-recommended reductions here.
And I did want to note that within the packet, I did include a memo that the committee received from council members Balcom and Lutke expressing support for the Damascus High School major capital project. With the non-recommended reductions, not including it at this time, that project, as we mentioned, is still on schedule. Once again, with the broader CIP issues going forward, that may have to be revisited.
Right. When you talk about a $400 million gap, there's only a number of places you can go. Another reason why we don't want to do that. But okay, so let's. I think we move on to the systemics.
Yeah, I'll turn this over to Mr. Prouty.
Okay, Mr. Prouty.
Yep, thank you. So for the systemic project, starting on page 10 in your packet, just a quick overview here. The two non-recommended reduction scenarios, scenario A maintains funding for most of the systemic infrastructure projects in order to maintain and to address the backlog of projects. Scenario B, however, does remove funding in FY29 for most of these projects. Some of them, there is funding left in FY29 for personnel, so as not to affect folks' employment. The first one here then is ADA compliance. This involves making sure that schools are accessible for all community members and students as well. On page 11, you will see that there's an inflationary adjustment in this particular project, and that goes from 1900 to 1957, from FY27 to 28, and continues along for the rest of the 6 years. There are a number of other projects in the system-wide projects that do include inflationary adjustments, and we're addressing those with OMB and MCPS to make sure that that's consistent with fiscal policy. So this one, the county executive did not recommend any changes. Scenario A would not affect this project. Scenario B would do a one-time reduction of $1.8 million, leaving $200,000 for personnel costs. We're recommending preliminary support based on the figures here, pending final reconciliation. And just to note, we are in general supportive of their non-recommended reductions in scenario A if these cuts indeed prove to be needed.
Appreciate that. ADA compliance is really important, and so I think without objection we'll concur, and realizing we have to fit it into the larger picture, but both scenario A and the county executive leave this alone. So, and we'll concur with that.
And just to note, big picture with scenario B, as Mr. Prouty mentioned, it affects FY29 because they had Eastern and Damascus moving forward basically on the same schedules. There's a big hit in the middle of the CIP, and they were trying to reduce that to try to get closer to the executive numbers. And that's why scenario B is what it is and has those reductions in 29. Staff's not suggesting that we assume FY29, those FY29 cuts at this time. We may have to come back to those,
Right.
but we don't know yet. There's too many moving parts to know whether FY29 will be a problem year or not. There could be a lot of other things that happen. So for purposes of tracking right now, we're recommending assuming scenario A, but not scenario B.
Yeah, and yes, we've kind of been doing that as we've gone along. We didn't say it that explicitly, but I agree with that generally with there's a few exceptions we'll talk about here later on, but I think colleagues, are you generally in agreement with that? Okay, so thank you for that. So let's move on to the alternative education.
Yep, it's alternative education program here again on page 11. There are currently two alternative education program sites, one at the Blair Ewing Center on Avery Road and also another one on the North Lake Center, which is typically used as a holding school. That occurred last year, that move. The board is requesting an appropriation in this project to fund the planning of a permanent location at the Spring Mill Center. The building on Avery is outdated and need to be addressed in a future CIP request. The county executive did not recommend any changes. Scenarios A and B would not affect this project. We are recommending preliminary support.
Without objection, we'll concur.
Okay. Next one is asbestos abatement. This is funding for an in-house team to ensure compliance in terms of the Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act, a federal act. And this, for this particular project, county executive did not recommend any changes. Scenario A would not affect this. Scenario B, again, one-time zeroing out of costs aside from personnel in FY29, that would amount to $114,000 and would leave $1 million in that year for personnel costs. A note in terms of that, most of the work of this project is personnel. And so the leaving the $1 million there would continue some of the work in FY29. Council staff's recommending preliminary support for this pending final reconciliation.
Without objection, we'll concur.
Okay, thank you. The next is building modifications and program improvements on page 12. This provides modifications to support program offerings at schools that are outside of the CIP in terms of particular projects. Some of this money has been transferred recently to the Woodward High School project to address a funding gap that occurred several years ago. The county executive did not recommend any changes to this project. Scenario A would not affect it. Scenario B, again, would assume a one-time zeroing out in FY29, and that would be in the figure of $6.3 million. Council staff is recommending preliminary support.
Without objection, we will concur.
Okay.
And I know we're flying through these, and these are big changes, but everyone's agreed, so we appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. The next project is the central office headquarters, the CESC replacement project. Mr. Levchenko did give you some details earlier about this. The county executive is recommending removing funding and suggesting MCPS, which MCPS has concurred with, investigate, have a potential public-private partnership, a P3 project here. Scenario A assumes that this will be pursued and it would reduce out-year expenditures to $10 million in FY 30, 31, and 32, and then put $270 million to this project beyond the 6-year scope of this particular CIP. We concur in recommend preliminary approval of this recommended reduction.
Without objection, we'll concur as well.
Thank you.
That's a big one. Thank you for being partners. And I know there's a lot of ideas about what could happen with the central office headquarters. But I think at this point, this makes a ton of sense. Thank you.
The next project is design and construction management. This implements multi-year capital improvements programs. There's support here for administration, design, and engineering services, and in Department of Facilities Management and Construction. The county executive did not recommend any changes here. Scenarios A and B would not affect this project, given the number of projects that are needed in terms of renovation or replacement. The council staff recommends preliminary support for this pending final resolution and reconciliation.
Without objection.
Okay, thank you. For early childhood centers, this is to boost the number of seats available for pre-kindergarten in Montgomery County. There's a number of different areas in which this might occur. One of the most notable ones is that the current Burtonsville Elementary School, when the new building opens, is thought of to be a potential site for pre-kindergartners in that particular part of the county. There's also possibility of an up-county early childhood center at Memory Grove to be maintained and then also to be fixed up. And the county executive did not recommend any changes to that project, to this project, I should say. Scenario A would remove all expenditures from the proposed CIP, which is $41.5 million over the 6-year period. Given that there is need in this area, but we understand MCPS's reasoning here, council staff recommends preliminary approval pending reconciliation.
Okay, thank you. Without objection, we'll concur as well,
Okay, thank you.
even though it's not what we would like to concur to.
Understood, not ideal at all.
Yeah. I mean, we want to be moving in the other direction. Councilmember Evans?
I want to be on record with that exact thought, that this is not what I would want to do, particularly for our earliest learners, but we understand the physical time that we're in. Mr. Conley, did you want to say something?
No, this got brought up last week at our board meeting. With the declining enrollment, we're actually able to expand pre-K a little bit, even so our kindergarten is, our K-5 enrollment's going down. So we're actually adding some seats in some very necessary spots of the county. So we are actually increasing a little bit. It's just not a dedicated facility for pre-K. So
Good to know. Thanks for adding that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for clearing that up. That's a good point. Early childhood will expand even in East County. Yeah. Mr. Prouty.
Thank you. So the next project is emergency replacement of building components. This is a project which does emergency replacement of systems such as HVAC or other vital systems within school buildings themselves. The county executive, one other note about this project, there is a inflationary increase scheduled for this project throughout the 6-year cycle. The county executive did not recommend any changes. Scenario A would not affect this project. However, scenario B, again, a one-time zeroing out of expenditures, that would be to the tune of $3.9 million. Council staff recommends preliminary support pending reconciliation.
Without objection.
Thank you. The next item on page 15 is facility planning. This is just what it sounds like. It's planning for future projects. There's increases in the level of effort for 28, for part of the proposed elementary boundary study that the board will be considering this spring. Just a note, there are several different options in terms of the timing of that boundary study. It would commence either in FY 28 or 29 and then conclude with implementation in 29 or 30. The county executive recommends some funding switches, some bond funding to current revenue funding. No changes in expenditures were recommended, and the council staff concurs with the county executive's funding adjustments for this project.
Nothing to add there? Okay. Yeah, you don't have to. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. All right. This is obviously, we talked about this earlier, will support the elementary school boundary study. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point that if, those funds that are tied to the P3 consultant, I think we're going to be exploring, because we're in the school building business, and we would really, really want to hire a professional consultant we are leaving no stone unturned in this county in terms of where we place our central headquarters, looking at our overall facility inventory. So this is very valuable to facilities management and MCPS as a whole, that we get that consultant. So we would want to prioritize this.
Understood. Yeah, and I think all of us want, there are some expenditures that can lead to savings, or and this is one that we hope will do that. So I think without objection, we'll concur.
Very good, thank you. The next item on page 15 here, fire safety code upgrades, is just what it sounds like. Addresses sprinklers, escape windows, exit signs, fire alarm devices, and other things associated with fire safety in buildings. The county executive did not recommend any changes to this request. Scenario A would not affect this project. Scenario B would zero out funding in FY29, and that would be a zeroing out of $3.9 million. Council staff is recommending preliminary support pending reconciliation.
Without objection.
Okay, thank you. The next item, this is on page 16 now of your packet, the Healthy Schools Project. This project is being removed from the CIP by the board's request. This is a state program which has been discontinued. The work of this program is being incorporated, or has been incorporated already, into other projects. So given that, council staff support the removal of funding for this project from the CIP.
Without objection.
Thank you. Holding school improvements. This is just what it sounds like. It would address things such as restroom renovations, roof or HVAC replacements, modular buildings at multiple holding schools. This has not been addressed in recent CIPs, so the superintendent did make a note in one of the presentations about the need for some funding here. The county executive did not recommend any changes to this project. Scenario A would remove all funding from this project for fiscal reasons. Obviously not an ideal situation, but understandable given the restrictions in terms of our current fiscal circumstances. Council staff recommends preliminary approval of this non-recommended reduction.
As you said, not ideal, but under the circumstances, we will concur also without objection.
Thank you. Next project at the top of page 17 in your packet is HVAC. We've already had discussion today about the need for HVAC improvements in a number of buildings in the county. The committee also has talked about this in previous sessions as well. The executive did not recommend any changes to this project, and scenarios A and B specifically do not affect this project because of the need for increased work in this. You will note decrease from FY7 to 28, and then increases following that. So we are recommending preliminary support pending reconciliation.
And just a question, question on this. Obviously, huge issue, comes up all the time, almost daily. Where do we reach the point of, if you could talk about how much money would actually, you can't do them all at the same time, right? So how far is this recommendation, I know it's still far, from the point of moving to where we actually, putting us on a path to where we need to be, if that makes sense?
Yes, so there's a huge extensive backlog, and the way we did this was a little different than our typical level of effort projects. We added one project and included inflation, but it's going to take a while. I don't have a year, but because depending on if we do a major capital project, that assumes an entire HVAC replacement in itself. So there are other factors that have to be taken into consideration, but quite frankly, we could ask for $100 million a year, and we would still be playing catch up.
Right.
That's where we're at.
And the utilization, so, if if some miracle there were more money in the capital budget, and you could increase these numbers, you'd be able to use it within the years to do. It wouldn't be a matter of you couldn't. There would be you wouldn't have to be able to move people out, or you would be able to utilize it. Correct?
So yes, that is correct. We are able to, if the funding increase, we can do the projects. Now, to answer your question, it would be beneficial to have holding schools like we could do for elementary schools where it's faster,
Right.
and we can do it in one shot. But we have been doing our secondary schools because due to their lack of being a holding school for our secondary students, but we are able to do them, over multiple summers.
Right.
But yeah, once the budget does show up, well, we start the design, and so the budgets that get approved won't start construction for another year or two because of the design process. But yes, we can, if the funding was available, we could definitely implement.
And one of the things we discussed with Dr. Taylor last time, which he agreed, and I think there was general agreement with everyone, was having, especially once we get through this CIP, having a longer term view of the, going past the 6 year, but, even out to even 20 years to show like how, and obviously things will change, but how we could potentially address our backlog of issues, including HVAC. And I think I think it's important to kind of set out the goal and show people what could be possible. So I just want to use this as an example. Did you have something? Councilmember Mick.
I know that we've gone over these numbers before, but if you could just share again what we're looking at in terms of the numbers of the schools that need HVAC attention and versus what we're able to do with the budget in front of us.
Yeah, we don't have an exact, but it's a lot. Even our newer schools, we're getting issues just 5 years after buildings open. Things break down. So it's a significant amount of our portfolio. We have 211 comprehensive schools at the moment, 238 facilities. I don't want to say all of them, but there are a significant amount.
Maybe I should have asked how many don't.
Yeah, you would have been better off.
So I think Dr. Taylor has been just sharing the simple math. Like if you take, 15 years is a good timeline for an HVAC replacement. We can push it to 20, even if you say it's 20 years, and take that 211 and divide it by 20. We're looking at 10 schools every year, and we're nowhere near that number. So
We have some that are 20, 26 years old with they're still working, but we know that they could go at any time, which is part of the reason why we increased the emergency replacement of building components. I think we probably should have highlighted that, but we did bump that up by, I think, 2 times of what we normally do, because if a fire panel goes down in the middle of a year, that's $750,000, just so everybody's aware. So we can't wait until the next year to use that fire safety upgrades PDF. So those are things that break down in the middle of the year that we have to replace immediately. So we were very cognizant of that we might have to tap into that fund. So that is why we increased that.
We have schools right now who have had semi-functional, we'll call it, HVAC systems for years, maybe a whole floor or a whole wing, with mold issues and humidity issues. And I know that you all are aware that and are continuing to refine the facilities conditions index and the way that takes all these different factors into account. We, as not just a school system, but as a county and within our government framework, don't have a great way of taking mold into account, not just in our schools, but in our housing and all that, and how to measure that. But we know that there are schools with constant recurring mold issues. It's like whack-a-mole trying to adjust that, and where we know that students and staff are feeling the effects of that, and that mold specifically is not taken into account in the facilities conditions index currently, and so there's proxies in there, but potentially probably not weighted enough in some situations, and I know that you all are taking that into account and continuing to work on that. And I will note that the FCI is a much better system than we have had in place previously, and that you all are working towards getting to something where we're really going to be able to go by the numbers in a very functional way. And of course, we all wish that we were there right now, but we're closer than we were before. But the air quality issue is such a serious one. And we know that there are some schools that have been increasingly vocal about that, and others who are on their advocacy journey. And there's more every year. I find out that there's more. So, and that are not showing up in the FCI currently. But we know, being on the ground, that there's really serious issues there. And I'm saying this to just highlight again how deep the needs are and how we don't have enough money in this space. And even I'm glad that you're putting more funding into be able to doing those emergency repairs. It's not going to cover all of these schools. Those schools are not going to suddenly be able to say, hey, our HVAC hasn't been working, we have an emergency, and be able to get the repair that they need. We'll be a little bit better, but we're not going to be able to address all of those issues. And so we're just in a place that should not be acceptable. We just should not be allowing this to happen. This is a little crazy making to me that we're just going to continue to let children and staff go into schools where we know that the air is not healthy for them to be able to breathe, and we're just going to move forward as if that's it. Okay. So whatever funding we can find, I really think that we need to raise the bond limit, as I've said before, but I know that we're continuing to have the conversation. We'll have the conversation again at full council. But whatever funding we can find anywhere that can be moved into health and safety needs to go there.
Thank you, Councilmember Meg. You okay? All right, so without objection, or not only without objection, in full support of the increased funding for HVAC, and appreciate the comments. So,
I did want to note that, and Mr. Juan is familiar with this, as is Ms. Mink. Over the past several years, the committee has been supportive of this and the roof projects and the other systemic projects to try to increase them and not cut them. And so we have actually seen, fairly significant increases in this project. And this year, if you look at the chart on the top of page 17, this would be a very significant six-year to six-year increase from the amended. So I think we're going in the right direction. We just have a long way to go.
yeah, and that's a really good point, Keith. Mr. Levchenko, I appreciate you bringing that up. The unfortunate part, too, is that we were spending the money and not counting it at one point. Like something would break down, the money wasn't in here, there would be an emergency, you'd had to spend it. So a few years ago, we said, let's actually count that money in the budget and be honest on the accounting. But you're right, this has gone up, and to your point, 214 million in the 6-year in the previous one, and then this would be a 397 million. So it's a big increase, but there's, like you said, there's big need, and so thank you for pointing that out.
Right, and the other thing to keep in mind, we have challenges at the state with state aid with a lot of projects, but with our HVAC and roof projects, we do tend to get very close to 50% with them. So it is a place where the state aid is helping more so than in other projects.
Another important point. Okay, so safe access to schools.
So the Safe Access to Schools project addresses vehicular pedestrian safety at various schools. This project is recommended for a decrease in the level of effort over the 6 years. You can see that in the chart on page 17. There is about a $3 million decrease proposed for each fiscal year from FY27 to FY30. The county executive did not recommend any changes to this project. Scenario A would not affect it. Scenario B, as with others, would assume a one-time zeroing out of $530,000 in FY29. Council staff does recommend preliminary support.
Without objection, thank you. We concur.
Materials management and building relocation. This is on page 18 in your packet. This is a new project to move the warehouse, which currently on Stone Street, to a new location. The new location, I believe it has been leased already. So this is a project that would build out the interior of the new materials management warehouse. The county executive did not recommend any changes. Scenarios A and B also would not affect this project. There is an assumption in terms of current revenue here that the county executive has assumed it is a reduction in current revenue as an undesignated reduction as part of his proposed CIP. Council staff is recommending preliminary support pending reconciliation. We obviously will have to think about this in the context of the current revenue circumstances.
Appreciate that. I know this was a new project, and it's obviously needed, but so I think without objection we'll support.
The next is the outdoor play space in athletic infrastructure project. This deals with a number of different areas in terms of outdoor improvements at both elementary, middle, and high schools. The Magruder, Springbrook, and Watkins Mill high schools are scheduled for new fields in this project during the 6-year CIP. The county executive did make a recommendation of a reduction and is recommending that this be applied to not installing artificial turf fields in the CIP. The reduction that the county executive recommended was $34.1 million across the 6 years of the project. Scenario A, as recommended, would not affect this project. Scenario B, as with others again, would zero out funding in FY29, and that would be a $10 million reduction. Council staff is recommending preliminary support pending final reconciliation, and note that the ultimate decisions in terms of fields is MCPS's. The county executive has, however, made his recommendation clear in terms of artificial turf as opposed to natural grass fields.
Just on that last point, so obviously, just let's get the authority clear here. So, county executive made a recommendation that differs from the school board on the fields. Turf, including the board included 72.9 for that includes artificial turf fields. The county executive recommended reducing that by 34.1 and removing the artificial turf, and assuming that all new replacement fields will be natural gas. Not natural gas, we don't want that. Natural grass. I don't think anyone wants that on the field. So talk about, depending on what the decision point here, related to the last point you made, obviously in the operating budget, we set the top line number. The school system can go back and change, and often does, moves things around in the pot. CIP is a little different, but maybe this is even a little different as well. I want to make sure I'm clear on if we were to concur with the county executive, for example, and say we're removing this amount, the expectation is that it wouldn't be used for artificial turf. What does that mean in the context of the CIP and what the school system would then go back to do with the money they have in this pot?
Well,
is that clear, Keith?
Yes. I mean, the issue has sort of come up periodically over the last decade or so as MCPS began to install artificial turf fields at its stadium fields. Those were generally funded when there was a major project at that site, typically a major renovation project at a school site. And they typically, the turf projects, generally speaking, do have a higher upfront cost. So there is a capital cost associated with that. This year, the MCPS has reallocated its costs to some degree into this project. This project, for several years since its inception, did not deal with the artificial turf stadium fields. Right. It was other children's playgrounds, a lot of elementary school related ball fields.
This was the scope was expanded.
Right. It was basically consolidated into this project as opposed to popping up in other projects periodically. And the council has spoken a couple times on the turf issue. It did pass a resolution, I want to say back in around 2015 or 16, where it supported organic infill for turf fields. The council has never specifically said that it would not support artificial turf fields. And so they have moved forward mainly on the school system side. The parks did build one field one artificial turf field at Blair High School. That's actually a park field shared with the school. I'm not aware of any other parks fields that have moved forward since then, but we've had a number of school fields over time that have. So I think if the council wants to revisit the turf issue, I think that's a sort of a policy issue unto itself. I don't know if you want to make that decision incrementally in a budget process per se. I think that's a policy issue the council could take up.
Well, yeah, obviously we could, or we could do a little bit in both places, I would think. So if we did recommend a reduction here in line with the county executive, could those savings be redirected to other places within the CIP, like HVAC, for example?
Yes, the specific capital cost savings from the, presuming that you're getting, and we want to confirm this with MCPS, for the specific projects they're talking about, the alternative of building the natural grass field would have an upfront savings. The concern, I think, from MCPS, and they can speak to this,
Sure.
is what are the ongoing costs in terms of maintenance or playability. There's a lot of programming concerns that MCPS has had. That's why they had moved forward with their turf fields at their stadium fields to begin with. Some of that would translate into costs, probably more so on the operating budget.
Yeah.
But I think that's
Got
a
it.
discussion I think we'd want to get some more information from MCPS about what the executive's alternative would mean specifically in this CIP going forward.
Why don't we, good thing we have MCPS here. Could you talk about that question?
Yeah, so obviously we have had the turf field conversations with our board as well, and the board, we, as presented some of the cost and benefits, cost versus benefits of the turf field. We, our athletic department do feel that there are benefits to the number of hours that you can get out of a turf field versus a grass field. So obviously at this point, it would depend on, what the funding decision is, and based on the appropriations, we would have to then go back to our board and look at the individual projects and have the board make that decision at that point, based on available funding, what would be the ultimate decision for individual schools. Obviously, as Mr. Lovachenko mentioned, that turf fields do cost a lot more. However, the number of hours that we can get, typically, how many?
Yeah, so we did an analysis, estimated usage over 10 years, because it's not just for athletics, it's also for PE, which is a high school requirement. And over a 10-year span, there was an estimate of roughly 69,000 hours that you could do on a natural grass field, a stadium field, versus 458,000 for a synthetic turf field. We even broke it down by so total use, how much it would cost to maintain, installation costs, even cost per hour over 10 years. So we've done that. And I think one thing that gets lost on this new PDF is there's other functions in this PDF. It's not just the turf fund. It's outdoor play space and athletic infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So if you've gone to any of our high schools, you know that bleachers fail. You've gone to some of our gymnasiums, the lights need to be replaced. The bleachers need to be replaced. So this is sort of an all-encompassing, not just for turf, but we typically take about $1 million or a little over $1 million out of PLAR currently to fix outdoor, so our tennis courts, our tracks, our lighting. That typically right now comes out of PLAR. So this is more dedicated for that, so that the PLAR can be used for interior use for those functions.
So that's part of the consolidation into this.
Yeah, it's multiple,
larger
yes.
PGA. So the 34, what I'm really trying, I'm going to turn to Councilmember Evans, then Mink in that order in a second, but just the 34.1 million was an attempt to relate that to the turf field cost. Is that a fair representation. You're saying there's other things in here. OMB is here. Well, I'm sorry. Thank you. You sat down at the end there. Could you just talk about the rationale and where you got that number from and all that, and then MCPS can respond. Then I'll turn to Councilmember.
Yes, absolutely. Veronica Howard from the Office of Management and Budget. We use those numbers from MCPS presentation to the board, where they were talking about the comparison between the turf versus natural grass and the cost. So what we did was looking at the schedule that they also provided with their submission, which ones were going to be the new installations for turf, and remove those costs at the cost that they provided in the presentation for artificial turf, and replace them with the cost of natural.
Right. So it removed, but it also allocated for the natural at those same sites.
Yeah.
During the course of the CIP project for the projects within this cycle.
Exactly. So they would have funding to do the turf for those schools.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so for installation costs of natural grass would be roughly $634,000. So that would be your capital cost versus synthetic turf, $2.5 million. That's your upfront capital cost. And then we also have a maintenance cost. So it's significantly more to maintain a natural grass field, $100,000, which would come out of the operating budget, versus $12,000 for a turf field. So you're looking at $100,000 operating versus 12, but you're talking $634,000 capital versus 2.5. So that's how Veronica got those numbers.
Got it. Okay. So there's no dispute on the numbers in that sense.
I'm really glad our OMB friends brought that out, because they were able to access our exhibits, which for the first time ever on the CIP, we gave a 6-year plan where we're planning on doing systemic and countywide projects in an effort to increase our transparency. You've already touched on how in the out years we did our level of effort as a level of effort versus previous years. So we are trying to trend
Agreed.
Positively.
I think not trying, we are, despite, it's a
Yeah.
big tanker. It's
Yeah.
it's moving slow, but I think that's a really good specific example. So first, Councilmember Evans.
Sure. So I don't know that I'm going to agree with my colleague, Chair Jawando, on. You haven't you're asking the question about the turf and wanting to be aligned with the county executive. I want to go with the school system in this case. And Mr. Conley, I don't know if you could remember this, but I'm going to go back to 2018. I think I remember specifically going to Springbrook, having a discussion, and at that time, the parents were really adamant about wanting turf. I think in this instance, for me, it comes down to equity. Students across the county are looking what their peers have at their school, and they know that as athletes or just participants at their school, they want to be able to have the space and the same as their peers across the county. And so when I think about the schools that we're talking about, Magruder, Watkins Mill, and Springbrook, I think before we go in the direction of totally doing away with turf and going to grass, that we really need to have outreach to our community about the education on what we think turf will do to our students and to our families versus grass. I think it has to be a conversation that we have countywide. What I know and what I hear as a former as a former school board member and a parent at Kennedy High School, what it was like for our students when they had grass fields, when it rained and the weather was bad, how long it took for them to be able to get back out into the field. That impacted their level of performance when they are competing. Hearing from their other peers across the county about how they were made to feel when they came to play on their fields, and they weren't conducive for that sport that they were participating in. And sometimes it led to altercations. And so I just really want to make sure that our community is aware when we're going to make such a huge shift and go a different direction, that they are aware of why we're going to do that. So for me, it's an equity issue. Our kids want turf. Some may not, but for the ones who are performing on the grounds. This is what they want. And what I can recall over the years of being on the school board, what we have been able to do is to make some of the adjustments that the advocates who were against turf have asked for in terms of how we, you mentioned the infield, like that's changed over the years in terms of what we used back in 2014 or 2016 up until now. I am going to acknowledge some advocates that I see that are really strong in wanting what they want and bringing forward the information. I see Kathy Michaels in the audience, and I see Diana Conway. Just want to say hello, and I always appreciate their advocacy, and I'm not saying anything different that you all haven't heard before. And you know what? I want to be respectful of you. I didn't mean to call you out if that's not something that you wanted me to do, but I'm holding you in high regard when I say your name. So I just wanted to kind of insert myself and just say why I wouldn't be supportive of making that change, but respectful of my colleague.
I appreciate that, and appreciate those comments, and I think we've answered a couple questions. I'll turn to Councilmember Minka that we know the numbers, we got the transparency around the numbers. We also answered the question that we could remove this money and then reallocate some of it into another pot like HVAC. So that was, we cleared that up. I think that was a question I had coming in. Councilmember Minka.
Appreciate the conversation, and also I'm just like the HVAC issue is more urgent than a lot of kids need fields. I have kids; they love fields. They want to be outside all day, and that it's an important part of kids being healthy, and all of that is important. At the same time, all of the money that's in this space, I question whether everything that's falling under this right now reaches the level of urgency that our HVAC needs that are about to go unaddressed reach. So if we're putting any money back in my opinion, it has to go into HVAC. It has to go into, we cannot have kids and staff who don't have clean air to breathe and not be putting money back there. I would be fine with moving more money out of here and moving it into HVAC. I think the grass and turf conversation is a difficult one, and I know that there's split opinions on that. I think that is all kind of to the side of the urgency of air quality and very basic health and safety infrastructure needs that we have. So I would ask that we be looking for ways to move funding now into the HVAC space.
Appreciate that. And to that point, the massive increase, I know it's a massive increase in this PDF because of the consolidation. Where's the breakdown? I know you mentioned several things like repairing something or, a playground set or, of the 15, I think I always get confused with this. This is 15 million, right, per year?
Yes, it should. The title should say the numbers are in thousands.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, we usually have that. I thought, okay. So of the 15 million, it jumps from 450,000 to 15 million a year, and then drops down to 10 million in the out years. Just where's the breakdown of what all that goes to, specifically?
So yeah, previously it was 450,000. To be perfectly honest, it wasn't enough.
Sure.
We should have been requesting more. We anticipate the first year, FY27, being 1.1 million in playgrounds, which, believe it or not, only gets you 2 to 3 full replacements because we have kindergarten, pre-K,
Good.
and grades 1 through 5.
So 1.1 of the 1.5,
Of the
1.1 of the 15 goes to playgrounds.
Because we still need to do the turf replacements that are already existing that are ending its useful life.
All right. And what's the cycle of those turf replacements?
Typically 10 years, which is why we did the 10-year maintenance and capital costs associated to turf.
All right. And even when you add that into the cost, the grass fields maintenance, I know the maintenance on grass can be higher, but there's obviously a maintenance cost with the turf too.
There's roughly $12,000 per year versus $100,000. But again, this is also curriculum related because RPE does not go out on the stadium. They're not supposed to go on the stadium fields. Councilmember Evans brought up Springbrook. Springbrook currently has the smallest footprint in terms of athletics, so that it's very challenging for their PE department. But if they could go out on their stadium field, it's much more conducive. They're not losing time in travel time. Supervision, you brought up supervision. Sometimes things happen the further you have to travel. So it's not purely
Sure.
just athletic. Maybe that's a little misleading in the title, but it is a part of the
Let's say
comprehensive.
outdoor play space too, yeah.
Yeah.
So let me let you finish. 1.5, 1.2 million, or what?
So
Where is this
I'll go-
listed? Is this listed in the appendix somewhere?
It's in the online on the exhibit. I can run through for 28 through 32.
Okay.
Playground, just pure playground replacements: 3 million, 2 million, 2 million, 5 million, 5.5 million.
And that's just on the playground.
That's
replacements. And then what's the rest of the money going to?
Right now, we have it listed as turf, but we plan, if we do a turf field, we typically replace the track. We would probably look at upgrading the lights.
So those are the larger fields that everyone's thinking about here.
And we obviously are going to refine this as we
Yeah.
go on. This is the first year at it, so.
And so the number that the CE recommended is not related to the playground spaces. It's related, or is it? It's just related to the turf fields. Got it. Okay.
That funding was left there.
Right. Okay. So you could still fix the playgrounds with the funding. It's the other is related to that. Got it. If you could just provide if we could just get to, when we go into full council, just the breakdown of this PDF of what the money goes to. At this point, your best knowledge of what it would go to, and I think that'll just be helpful for people, so we don't have to rehash this part of the conversation. And I know it's available on the thing, but I mean in our packets, so there's a greater chance that colleagues will be able to read it. So I agree with Councilmember Mink on the HVAC issue. So what I'd like to do is and share the concerns on the plastic and turf fields, but I'm very sensitive to the playgrounds as well. I've got 3 kids on the playgrounds all day. Probably one that just got off of one. So I think what I'd like to do, propose, and I understand Councilmember Evans, your position, is that we concur on the 34.1 million and then move that into the HVAC in the same way that it was removed in the years. So I don't know which years that was removed from total.
Right, we would have to get the breakdown,
Yeah.
which we can get from OMB.
Okay.
In fact, we have the executive's numbers for this project.
Right.
So assuming there's nothing else technically happening, we could do that. There is one budgetary policy issue. It's never really been fully resolved, but if you recall the HVAC project, right now the committee is supporting the request that the board had. We're not recommending a reduction. The scenarios.
This would be an increase.
So it's unclear whether the council can approve something beyond what the board has requested. It's sort of an open issue over the years. It very rarely happens. And given the fiscal situation we're in this year, I'm not sure it would happen this year either. That 34 million would help towards the
general CIP.
The general CIP most likely. But just because the committee is supportive of HVAC, just to sort of have a belts and suspenders approach here, by the end of the CIP, if that in fact were to happen, I think we would want the board to revisit the HVAC project and support a higher number in it to avail themselves of that money from here. Just to make sure that we don't get into trouble from approving
Yeah.
more than they asked for.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So more, we can get the details on it for the
If we can
committee.
indicate that that's the desire of how to use the balance of the money. Obviously, if the board chooses not to do that, that's what they choose, and then we would, as we get towards reconciliation. Well, they would need to act before. They would need to indicate their preference prior to the end of May.
Yeah, that
And,
would be.
and as part of the
ideal.
reconciliation process. So I know we have one board member here and probably others watching, Board Member Stewart. But so why don't we indicate that that's a 2-1 thought, and I'll let you chime in that 34 million, 34.1 would go to HVAC, but we'll still recommend the reduction, and realizing if they say no or they don't speak to it, then we realize it would go to the general CIP pot. I would think. Okay, Councilman Ming.
Yeah, I was going to say that if that HVAC work was to fall under the emergency replacement of building components section or the larger HVAC projects, maybe that can be part of the recommendation from MCPS if they were to have that the opportunity. Then it could potentially, if we're addressing an HVAC need, it may fall under a major project or may make more sense depending on how much it is and the timing and so forth for that to fall under the emergency replacement. I would think that either of those would be fine with the understanding is that we're looking to address urgent HVAC issues.
Yeah, and so maybe as you take this back and as we head towards just consult internally with the superintendent and with the board about how you think you would address this, not only this outdoor play space athletic infrastructure with the reduced amount of funding. Obviously, this is a recommendation. The full council could do something different. But I think it would be due diligence to just go back and see how you would do it and talk with the board about this idea of where the balance might go, considering that. Yes, Councilman Ray.
Two other questions. One is whether if MCPS also, if you have explored the possibilities for PPPs for funding for the fields. I mean, I know that you have to some extent, but like, what do those conversations look like? And maybe this is just something part of the conversation that we include when we bring this conversation back. But obviously, looking at other funding mechanisms for anything is a benefit now, and this is one that I know has been discussed here and there. And so I see, are you reaching for the button? You're welcome. You're welcome to speak to it if you want.
Yeah, no. So there has been some private partnerships in the past for the turf field. I believe we do have one or two currently that were there were investments from outside entities. The issue then again, conversation becomes about they're having a little bit more access to those fields, and that leaves out other folks, and that has been the concern in the past, which was what has led to us not considering renewing those agreements in the past. I mean, again, we have not finalized that conversation with our board, but that has been the concern in the past is if we are bringing in partners, obviously when we're doing a P3 for a building, like we talked about for maybe a replacement for our headquarters, there could be other economic incentives that everybody could benefit from, but for the field, it's a little bit tricky. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, I understand that. And I think it would be helpful still to have that context because obviously we're looking at nothing that we're talking about is ideal, right? We have to give a bit in however we go, and we're working with a very limited pool of money and really extensive needs. And so if, whatever turf and grass options you have that are on the table for you all and understanding the implications of that, I think is important to have as part of the conversation to consider. And then would also like to just better understand the, our not being able to add funding over what was requested. Is that, where does that live?
I would say it lives in a legal gray area. It's not, in the past when these issues have happened, to avoid sort of coming to that legal issue, the council has asked the board to request something, and then the board will request it, and that's the way we move forward.
I'm confused about what legal gray area means. What indicates that? I mean, I would think that the default would be that we could do it, but so what indicates that we might not be able to do it?
Well, I don't pretend to be an attorney, but I think the issue is that the council approves the board's requests, and the interpretation of that is you approve the request or you approve something less than the request. To approve more than the request is going beyond what was requested. So that's, I think, where the legal gray area is. But I'm happy to take this back to the legal staff here and talk more about that issue. But the way we've worked the issue out is to just ask the board to request something, and then they do, and then the council is able to move forward with what they wanted to do.
Okay, well, I mean, I would add, given that there's nothing telling us that we that I can tell that we can't do that, then I would ask that the default coming out of this meeting, knowing what two of us want to do, would be to just do the thing that we want to do, and then that's what we would vote on at the council with the context of, the legal information that I think we're going to want for this regardless.
Yeah, I'll just say, and I'll turn to Councilmember Evans, historically, this has come up in the past. We haven't done it, but the trying to be within the confines of the board's authority and our authority, that's kind of where the balance has been struck. It's never been tested or litigated, or there's no on-point legislative language that I'm aware of that says you can't do this or you can do it. So I think that's the point Mr. Levchenko's making. So it's not I think it's less open of like we can or we can't. I think it's just we haven't. And typically, our job is to say what we can afford and what we can't. And we can, in the CIP, we have a little more to move around within projects and that kind of thing too. So I get your point. I think we should ask, but I think my preferred route, which I've suggested here, is that you go back to MCPS, go back and speak with the board and see, we are going to take this recommendation to remove the 34.1 million and what that would mean. And you're hearing a strong preference from at least two committee members to reallocate that to the HVAC, where you've previously stated that there could be $100 million each year and we could spend it, right? And obviously there's not that in there. So, yeah, let me just go to Councilmember Evans. Yeah.
Sure. I was, so thank you for your comments. What I'm thinking about is just, asking us to be cautious about what we're asking the board to do, because we're having them request more money, which in a time such as this, I don't think that they would be comfortable doing that. If I could speak I won't speak for my colleagues, but I think I can. So I just hate to put them in a bind where they have to make a decision where it looks like they're taken away. Anyway, so I just wanted to say that.
I mean, the other thing too is that the status quo would be we remove the money and it goes into the pot and could go somewhere else. It's not higher than had been requested previously. It's the same top line number, but it's just where it would go within the project. So
Okay.
yeah.
So if they want to, they'll make the decision, but I'm just putting that
No, I get
out
it.
there.
I get it. Okay. Yes, Councilmember Mick. Last word.
Okay, all right, I appreciate it. Yeah, and I'm just trying to so my debate here is just to try to give the HVAC money the best possible chance. I don't even think we have to resolve the grass turf conversation today. My concern is with the HVAC. And so knowing that we've just voted to, remove the funding here, a pot of funding as recommended by the CE, my goal is to have that money be available for HVAC. So I'm just thinking about how to basically give it the best chance of real consideration and survival once if we're able to consider that at the full council level. And so as I think about how it's going to appear in the staff packet, is it a committee recommendation as a line item, 34 million for HVAC, and then we're going to decide on that, yay or nay, or is it going to appear as the committee asked the board to come back and get, you know what I mean? And so that's why the hesitation for me, and that's why the extra pushing, as I'm just thinking about if we have an opportunity here to get a few million more that could really make a difference to the air quality, how can we give it the best chance of survival to have a really meaningful vote and opportunity when we get to full council?
I appreciate that. I am not comfortable saying it with that level of certainty. I would like to have I am certain I want to remove the 34.1 million for the turf fields for both the health and safety and the reasons that the county executive has removed them. Second, just give me 1 second. Yeah. But on the second piece, I would prefer that the schools not sacrifice that money and reallocate it within their request, HVAC being a prime space, as opposed to having that money just go into the general pot. And I would ask that the MCPS go back and speak with the superintendent and with the board on what if that's something they would like, realizing it's not higher than the top nine. You could still be in compliance with scenario A, I think, at this level, not go above. So it wouldn't be an overall increase. That would be my suggestion, as opposed to, and then also getting some clarity on the legal stuff in between now and full council. And if we do have clear authority, or if there is something else we can find on that, then we can revisit that. But at this point, I'm not comfortable with that. Is that clear?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we can represent the committee's approach here, and we can run it by committee members before the full council discussion to make
great.
sure it reflects what the committee wants.
Appreciate that. And yes, I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
I just want to be crystal clear on the request. So the $34 million for adjustment, are we asking the board which countywide project, or are we asking specifically for HVAC? Like,
Well, I think there's a strong suggestion that it go in HVAC.
I just want to relay the question correctly on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, I think Councilmember Mink wants it to go to HVAC 100%. I think that's where it should go. I am open to,
Okay.
if they want to come back and say, no, I'd rather it go here for X, Y, and Z reason.
Okay.
I want to know what that reason is, but I would have a strong preference for it to be HVAC, realizing we're trying to see legally, can we make it go to HVAC?
Okay.
So
Got it. I just want to
that context.
reflect your.
Is that all right? Go ahead.
I mean, if it's not going to HVAC, I have a hard time seeing myself saying that I stand by my support of it over there. So I want to,
Yeah, got it.
it would have to be very well defended, health and safety, very urgent need.
Yeah. But I don't want to shut down. I never like to say, don't tell me what you would want to do. No, you should come back and say what you want to do. All right. So we are making a 2-to-1 recommendation to concur with the executive in the removal of the 34.1 million. And a strong suggestion with some research coming on that it should be reallocated to the HVAC. MCPS is going to go back and speak with their board and the superintendent about what they think in regards to that, and get back to us as we're dealing with all of this. Does that make sense?
We got it.
All right,
Yep.
great, thank you.
Yep.
Good with that? And you're good with the position that you've taken? Got it, okay. All right, we're good.
We record the vote as well.
Thank you.
You're
Let's
welcome.
continue.
Yep. So the next project is the Planned Life Cycle Asset Replacement, or PLAR. This is on page 19 of your packet. This is a project which does facilities improvements in a number of different areas within buildings. You'll note that during the 6-year cycle of this CIP, there are inflation adjustments every year for this project. The county executive is recommending approving with technical modifications, and that the scenario A would not affect this project. Scenario B, again, would zero out FY29. This would be to the tune of $11.2 million, with an exception of $1.5 million related to staffing costs for this particular project. Council staff recommends preliminary support pending reconciliation.
We kind of previously discussed this, planned life cycle replacement. We want to keep heading in the right direction of fixing things, so this is continuing to do that. Without objection, we'll concur.
Thank you. The next item is relocatable classrooms. This is a project which provides relocatable classrooms to schools that need them because of capacity issues. This one, the funding is projected to decrease a little bit under their board's proposal each year. Scenario A does not affect this project. Scenario B assumes, again, a zeroing out in FY29 of $3.5 million. We could recommend deferring consideration of this project pending a supplemental appropriation request, which comes in the spring every year from MCPS when they have numbers in terms of enrollment that they are more certain of, and therefore can project how many possible relocatable classrooms they will need for the following year.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Mink?
Thank you. I understand that the cost of installing relocatable classrooms has gone up as a result of the sprinkler situation. Could you explain?
Yeah, so the building codes have changed recently. So if the portables are, could not be placed within a certain distance from the existing building, they now require, the code requires us to put in sprinkler system, even though these are considered temporary buildings, which obviously adds to the cost because we have to run the lines and then obviously make sure that they're protected because it could easily freeze, especially if the buildings, outside and, because their insulation is not like a regular building. So there's a lot more work that goes into these portables with the code change so that the cost has gone up for every single building that we put in.
Was the code change intended, like written specifically intentionally to apply to school portables, or is that kind of a side effect of how it was written to not exclude them?
It was specifically because I remember having these conversations a few years ago prior to me, moving to MCPS. It was something that was put in specifically that made sure that the school used portables are sprinkled. The overall code addresses all portables, but I think it has to do with the number of occupancy. So when you talk about certain number of people in that classroom, this code is gonna apply. There are only I think there were some grandfathering with existing buildings and whatnot. So we don't have to go back and reinstall the sprinkler system in existing buildings, but any new ones.
I know that there were schools that really wish they had gotten their portables a year earlier. And now they're stuck. Obviously, if this is necessary for safety, then we want it. But is it adding both expense and installation time?
Yes.
Okay. And do you, from where you sit and in the expertise that you bring to the role, do you see other cheaper, easier options to accomplish the same safety goals if there was to be more flexibility written into the code?
I mean, the code was obviously when it first came out, created a lot of headaches for a lot of LEAs. I mean, because again, the timing, a lot of the times because of the way the budgets work in the state, whether it's the local fundings don't get approved or the fundings don't get appropriated till July 1. This was something that was a lot of LEAs pushed back on. I think there was a distance requirement when the code came out. I'm not that well versed right now if that has changed in the last year or two, that it was like it used to be that if you maintained a certain distance from an existing building, that you could not have to put in the sprinkler system. That's something that could be, if that was revisited, that could help out. If there was a sufficient distance between the building and the portables, then you forego the sprinkler requirements. It would definitely make it faster and cheaper.
Okay. Well, maybe there's a conversation that we can come back to as we look at next year's state legislative session, if we might want to propose some tweaks here, because I've seen this come up now in multiple times, and it's not just sometimes it's for capacity issues. Sometimes it's so that we have the ability to get classes out of really unsafe spaces in terms of the air quality issue that we're talking about. And we're fighting so many battles on so many fronts, and just having another, this one in the way. So now we've got kids who are breathing worse air because we're afraid that because we want them to have a sprinkler system. I want them to have a sprinkler system also. But if it's a difference of a few yards here, I mean, how much sense does this really make? Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's come up in other contexts too, in the agricultural zone of people who live on, work in the agricultural space. The cost of building this new regulation, the cost of building a temporary seasonal housing and having to put in sprinklers has been really impactful. Even though, like, for example, there's a ton of windows, you're on one floor. It's not you're not jumping 5 flights. And so I'm not a fire safety expert, but this has been raised in multiple contexts. I think it's worth looking into, given some of the trade-offs. Okay, so without objection, we will accept that decrease.
Well, we suggested pending receipt of the supplemental from MCPS.
Yes, pending the receipt of the supplemental.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. The next item in the packet on page 20 is restroom renovations. It is exactly what it sounds like. There's a inflationary factor built in over the 6 years of this particular CIP. The county executive did not recommend any changes. Scenario A would not affect this project. Scenario B, again, zeroes out the expenditures in FY29, and that would be put to $5.8 million in FY29. We recommend preliminary support based on final reconciliation.
Without objection.
Thank you. Next item is roof replacement. This, you can see over the period of the 6 years, increases by $1 million, then 2, then 3, then 2, 4, and 3 again. In order to be able to add to the number of roof replacements done each year, there is a significant backlog in terms of the need for these. And the county executive has recommended some technical modifications, a funding switch in FY27 between state aid and GO bonds to reflect the state aid requested by MCPS. The scenarios, both A and B, non-recommended reductions would not affect this project. Council staff is recommending preliminary support pending final reconciliation.
Without objection.
Thank you. Moving to page 21, got a few left here. School security systems. There is a steady number for the first 3 years in this particular project, and the funding decreases over the last 3 years of this particular CIP. The county executive does not recommend any expected changes, but does recommend switching $28 million of the 6-year total from GO bonds to current revenue based on the asset life assumptions of the equipment. These scenarios recommended for non-recommended reductions would not affect this project. We recommend preliminary support.
Yes, Ms. Howell.
Just to clarify, the county executive did recommend a change in this project in FY27, reducing the funding in FY27 to allow CPS to use their unspent budget carryover balance.
So explain that to me. So what I see on the PDF is, so explain, say that again.
Sure. So line number 2, it starts with $8 million under FY27. Those $8 million were reduced. I mean, the portion that reflects local funding.
Okay. Got it.
Because under FY26 estimated budget, they have a very large balance that they could spend.
Does MCPS have anything to, is there, so this is based on asset life assumptions or what?
This is the school security system.
No, I know, but what, so the switch, I think it was said in somewhere in the packet that the school security funding from GO bonds to current revenue was based on asset life assumptions.
Well, that's
Yes.
that's a different point. And to qualify for bond funding, you expect a useful life of 10 to 20 years. Some of the security equipment is not expected to last that
Less than that,
long.
yeah.
So OMB went through and worked with MCPS to identify what was, from OMB's standpoint, eligible for bond funding versus current revenue. Anything can be funded with current revenue.
Sure, yeah.
So OMB recommended that the project have both current revenue and bonds, depending on what's assumed to be purchased. So that's one change.
Right.
The other change the executive recommended was utilizing carryover money that has not been spent yet in the project.
Got it.
It's been appropriated but not
Two
spent,
things.
rather than appropriating new dollars in FY27, utilizing the carryover from the prior year.
Got it. And how much was carried over?
Around 12.
Around 12. Okay. Are there any other projects where this type of thing would apply, where you could switch some funding out of bonds into current revenue?
Well, there are a couple other areas where the executive made that same recommendation in this packet. I don't know if I think we brought them up once or twice, but not a lot. There's most of the stuff.
Most
in
of them
here,
are longer term things. Yeah.
Most is long term,
Yeah.
and it's we would hesitate to switch things to current revenue that are eligible for bonds.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's first, our current revenue situation in the operating budget is no picnic either.
Right. Right.
And also, if it's bond eligible and you're using current revenue, you could also utilize PAYGO for that. So some of the PAYGO that we use each year in the CIP can also go to help reduce your bond costs. So I'd hesitate to purposely do that unless you have a good reason that it's not doesn't have a life cycle that warrants.
Yeah, no, I
bonds.
think it would need to be based on the same factors, but, and like you said, there's a couple places where we did do that earlier, so, okay.
Right.
So there was an analysis done of that in the context of this proposal. Great. So without objection. Oh, I did, we'll talk about this in the operating budget. I just want to flag for Mr. Prouty, when we get to the security component of the operating budget, I just want to talk about the system, the pilot stuff and where we are with the system. Some of these things that we just are switching into current revenue, the kind of the status of those, and, whether it be I would imagine it'd be things like cameras or door locks and things that might be shifted over. I just want to intentionally talk about those things when we get into the operating side. So just kind of a flag.
It's still going to be funded out of the CIP.
Right.
But as current revenue, it's the same dollars that you're using in the operating budget.
Right.
And you do tend to have those discussions during the operating budget.
Right.
Like with TechMod is a good example.
Correct, yeah.
That's current revenue funded, but it's got a multi-year planning element to it that makes it work a little bit better in the CIP. But you tend to have the discussion of the technology issues in MCPS on the operating side.
Yeah. So I'm just flagging it so that I don't forget and we don't forget so that we have that discussion. Great.
And staff can work more with OMB and MCPS on this carryover issue and how that might benefit this project, what they could do with that extra money or what they would
Yeah, that
not
would be
do
great.
if they don't have it.
That'd be great. To
look more into
illuminate,
that.
to kind of expand on that. That would be great. Thank you. Okay. Stormwater.
Okay, stormwater discharge management, this is providing funds.
Mr. Prouty, your mic is off. Yeah. Your
There we
voice
go.
carries so well, I could barely tell.
There you go. It's teacher voice. There you go. So thank you for noting that. So this provides funds to help meet state requirements in terms of how sites are surveyed and planned to mitigate stormwater runoff. The county executive did not recommend any changes to the board's request. Scenario A would not affect this project. Scenario B would, again, zero out costs in FY29. That would be $990,000 with $200,000 set aside for staffing costs. Council staff does recommend preliminary support as the proposed by the board pending final reconciliation.
Without objection. Thank you.
Okay. Top of page 22, sustainability initiatives. This funding, again, has an inflationary increase each year over the 6 years of the CIP. This is to move towards the goals of the county climate action plan. All new schools, new construction, and system replacements are constructed to meet these requirements. The reallocation does not impact current initiatives. There was a new reallocation that was done in FY25, and then in FY26 reallocated money to other projects from this one. The county executive does not recommend any changes, and scenario A does not affect this project. Scenario B, again, in 25-29 would zero out $3.5 million from this, leaving $150,000 for staffing costs. So this would reduce funding from the amended FY25-30 budget, but increase that reduced amount over the period of years for inflation. And council staff recommends support pending final reconciliation.
Without objection.
Thank you. The TechMod project, this is considered as part of coordination in terms of the operating budget. We do this every year. It's a component in terms of the school system strategic technology plan, and we will discuss this in detail during the operating budget as we do every year. So we recommend this request to be discussed in that context.
As alluded to by you and Mr. Levchenko, we will definitely do that.
Thank you.
Without objection.
And the last project for today, transportation and regional support facilities. This is a project that is being added in order to be able to deal with the potential closure of the Shady Grove Depot. Is the appropriation for FY27 is to begin planning for 2 new facilities to house buses. The county executive did not recommend any changes. Scenario A would defer this project by 3 years, spending beginning in 30 instead of 27. If the project is delayed and the Shady Grove Depot is vacated, NCPS would need to find place to accommodate 450 buses at other facilities throughout the county. There was some discussion about possibilities in this regard, and we do recommend preliminary approval pending final reconciliation.
So just on that, this is an issue that always comes up and communities very engaged on it. So should the deferral happen, what was the discussion about what would be done in relation to the vacating and moving the buses in that 3-year period? If anything, I mean, what's the best thinking at this point?
So we are working with DGS on one of the projects to relocate some of the buses to another facility. That would allow us to remove some of the buses, but I mean,
Some meaning.
I believe that number is in the tune of somewhere close to 150 buses out of the 450 that we need to move out.
So effectively, this just means this project would just be delayed, and there'd still be some bus presence at the depot.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Yes. So,
Also, it would mean that the county will not be able to sell the property where they are located at this moment and be in alignment with the master plan, which require to make a development used in
on that
property.
spot. Yeah. So. So obviously, the longer the buses sit there, you can't redevelop. Yeah. So understood. But there's a cost to the finding a new spot. Yeah. So okay. Reluctantly, without objection.
And that takes care of the system-wide projects for this particular CIP. Thank you, Council President, Council Chair, Committee Chair Joanna. Now I got it, and other
That's all
committee
right.
members.
I appreciate the promotion. So thank you all. Really appreciate the work, and so I think council staff, we have made our choices and preferences known. And we know what to do. So this will end our MCPS CIP at the committee level, and it'll now go into the big, larger conversation. Right? And to the extent that we get feedback on things that we've talked about today, you'll come back to the committee offline, and we'll take those up. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. With that, we are adjourned.